Hi everyone, my name is Jessica, and I decided to do my Think Aloud on Padlet. It really let me use the grid to organize my thoughts and kind of put what I was thinking in my brain onto this website. So it really helped show my train of thought and show what I wanted students to get out of this lesson. So basically, my lesson is uh, based in second grade, and the main content area I wanted to focus on was math. And so I really wanted to link math to literacy, but more specifically visual literacy. So in the first column, I just have some general information about this lesson plan. And the first box says lesson plan, and it is using math to improve literacy in the real world. The lesson topic I chose to focus on was shapes. And then the lesson purpose was the purpose is to teach students about different shapes and how they're important and seen in everyday life. Students will become more visually literate and aware of their surroundings. So my main purpose of wanting to create this lesson was to show kids that math is not something that's always just used in the classroom. Math is absolutely everywhere. And I think it's really important to show them that, especially at a young age, because a lot of students, by the time they reach higher middle level school and going to high school, they really don't have the patience and don't want to learn math. But I think it is so important to keep them interested and keep them learning about why math is so important to learn. So that kind of is the root of the purpose I chose for this lesson. And then some objectives I had two. So the first objective I had was the student will be able to identify shapes in their everyday environments, and the student will be able to identify different shapes and understand their definitions. So what I want to do with this lesson, I want to overall teach students about different shapes, and I want them to understand their definitions and learn what they are so that they can use them in um, future educational schooling years. And then another objective I had was just to focus on showing them that shapes are in everyday environments and showing them how to find those shapes in everyday environments and showing how important it is to start looking for those and realizing that math is everywhere we look. And then I did have some essential questions. So those were, what shapes do you already know? Do you see these shapes around you? And what shape do you see most often? So basically, these are kind of just to help gauge my knowledge of what the kids already know and help me realize what I should be focusing on, what I should not be focusing on, and kind of just sets the tone for the rest of the lesson. So after the introduction, or after the general information's out of the way, I'm now going to start with the introduction to shapes. So with this part of the lesson, this will be the beginning of the class period. And this will be a learning portion of the class. So this will really be when students are absorbing the most information about shapes and learning as much as they can before we continue with the rest of the lesson. So it's really just setting them up with the tools they need to complete the lessons for the day. So, strategies used to introduce shapes. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to start this lesson by having all the kids together, so it's more of like a guided practice type of lesson. So the first part of the lesson will be an introduction of shapes. In this introduction, there will be a PowerPoint on the screen, and all the students will be sitting by the screen in a spot where they can see the PowerPoint I will be presenting. So basically, every classroom has like a pull-down projection screen or like a smartboard or some type of screen where you can display a PowerPoint. And on this PowerPoint, I will have it will contain various shapes and a definition that accompanies each shape. So basically, each slide will have a different shape with its definition. So it breaks up the shapes into smaller pieces, so it's easier for the students to absorb into their brains and learn. And then after all the shapes we are learning about that day are covered, I will then have a review slide. So basically, once I go through all the shapes that will be mainly focused on that day in class, I will have a review slide that has all the different shapes, but just the shape itself, no definition, no explanation. And once I have this review slide up, I will show the shapes up on the screen and have students raise their hands and tell me what each shape is and what the definition is. So basically, say I show a triangle, I will call on students and see if they say it has three sides, it has three vertices, and kind of just stuff like that to see if they absorbed anything that I said in the PowerPoint. And if there is a shape where students seem hesitant to raise their hands or no one raises their hands, then I will go back in the PowerPoint and review what I taught them just to make sure that they are really grasping what I'm teaching them, because it is a very important concept to grasp. So that's kind of the PowerPoint where it's more of a guided lesson. I will be presenting the information. They will really just be listening and asking any questions they have. So this is more of me leading the learning in this sense. Then some resources that I will use to help me is this video by Jack Hartman. And it really is just it's like what I would have in the PowerPoint, but it's in like a more funky, catchy tune. So it shows the kids like what a triangle is, what a like a diamond is, square is, and it shows like how many vertices, how many sides, but it's more of a visual representation rather than just words on a screen. So if your kids are more into like the music and the visuals, then I would really show this video, which is just on YouTube. And if they are more of a sit down, relaxed class, you can just show the PowerPoint. But in my class, I plan to show both of these elements. So I would show the video first to kind of give a whole overview of what I want them to learn, and then the PowerPoint will be a more in-depth explanation of what the shapes are. And then I did have another resource. So this is when the students will have learned about their shapes and is still in the introduction part of the class period. So this will be like the more of the experimentation time where they can test their knowledge and see what they know. So I'm going to go ahead and click on this website. And basically it is just second grade geometry or like math games. And there are so many that they can choose from. It's a really great resource for them to start using and getting comfortable with, because there are a lot of these now since technology is so popular in the classroom. The one that really catches my eye is the identifying shapes by attributes. So this really just shows, like, in the little bubble screen you can see it says what shape has 5 equal sides or 6 equal sides. I think, it says 5. So then they would choose, okay, the pentagon. So it kind of just gives a different visual representation of the shapes that we're learning, and it really helps them read online technology, because they're going to have to pull important information from this website to get to the games they want to get to. So they're going to have to click on online games, they're going to have to click on their grade, and they're also going to have to click on math and then geometry. So there is more reading on here, but it's important for them to really read and know what to look for when looking at these websites. And then once they get here, there is so many for them to choose from. It really just opens their eyes to technology there is and how it can help them learn different shapes. So I thought this was a really great online resource for them to have, and they can even use this at home. They can use this anywhere. So I really liked this website, so I really wanted to include it in my lesson plan as an online resource. So once that whole thing of introduction to shapes is done, I will move on to more of the assessment of shapes and what they learned from the introduction. So basically, the strategies used to test knowledge of shapes. So this will be also more of a guided practice. So this will be with the class as a whole. So to start assessing what the students were able to learn, I will show a picture on the screen for all the students to see. The picture will be anything from nature or any landscape. Once the picture is presented to the class, the students will then raise their hands and tell me all the shapes they see in the picture and explain why it is that certain shape. So basically, it is a big class game of I Spy, and I'll show a big picture on the screen. They will raise their hand if they see a shape. I'll call on them and they'll explain to me what shape they saw, why it's that shape, and explain like the definition, explanations, all that stuff, so I can see if they understand what shape it is or if they're just saying a random shape. So this will help me continue to gauge their knowledge and assess what they have learned about shapes in this class period. I will continue this strategy for a couple of pictures or until every student has gotten a turn to find a shape. So I'll make sure if one student has already found a shape, I will not call on them the next time, just so that each student has a chance to be heard. And so yeah, this will really just continue until every student has gotten a turn, or as long as you think is necessary. So if the students are really not getting the concept, then you can keep going through different pictures and keep going and pointing out to them if you see something and they don't see it, explaining why you see it, kind of just guiding their practice and guiding their new knowledge of these shapes. And then another strategy I had was after the PowerPoint is over, the students will have time for partner work. So this is where more of the independent practice comes into play. So the class will be broken up into a set of partners, and each set of partners will get a different nature or real life scene. and will have to identify and write down as many shapes as they see and indicate it on their paper. So basically, this is like mini games of I Spy, but it is more independent and there is no guided instruction from the teacher. It is all individual or with their partner. And so if they see a picture and they notice that they see a triangle, then they'll write down on a piece of paper triangle and explain then what a triangle is. So this is kind of like the big class game, but instead they're writing it down and doing it more individually. So I will wait till all groups are done writing down what they saw in the picture. And then once all the groups are done, they will come back together as a whole class and explain where they saw their shapes and how they found them. So this will allow the class members to learn from each other, and each student will get to apply what they learned in the initial shapes PowerPoint. So once all the groups are done, all the class will come back together as a whole, and one group of partners will go at a time. They'll show their picture and then explain what shapes they found, and then go to say, this one was a triangle because it showed 3 sides and stuff like that, so that the whole class can just keep hearing the same explanations and the same shape attributes so that they can keep getting them into their brain and keep learning them. And then also, since each set of partners will have a different picture, this will really open their eyes to seeing how many real life scenarios that there are shapes. So say one picture's at a park, then kids will get to see that shapes are everywhere at parks. If it's in the forest, then kids will see that shapes are in the forest. And then shapes are really anywhere you look. So I think using these pictures and using class instruction to independent practice, they can really see what they're learning and see that shapes are everywhere. Some questions I had to check for understanding, because this is a very important part of teaching. You want to make sure your kids understand where you're coming from and understand what they're learning. So 2 questions I had were, where are some places we see circles, triangles, or squares, and how many sides does a triangle have? You can use that second question with any shape you've covered that day just to do a little pop quiz on your students and to see if they are picking up what you're saying. So I just thought this would be important to include in my lesson because I will be doing understanding questions when I'm a teacher. And this is just an online resource I had. It's just from a website, but use this photo or a different landscape to have students define and identify all the shapes they find. So this is just an example photo. As you can see in the bridge, there is the X there's an X in that little square, and there are like 4 little triangles in there. So this just shows that there are little shapes everywhere you look. So you can use this photo, you can use any other photo, and then you'll really leave it up to the kids and their brains to find the shapes in the photos. And these photos you can find anywhere on Google. I just searched like a city landscape and that popped up. So this was a super easy online source. This is really just a teacher source compared to the video and the education games and the introduction. So the assessment is more so them writing stuff down, and it is really focusing on that independent practice. So once you have gone through the assessment of shapes, you then will go to the end of the lesson, which is the reflection of shapes. So basically, this is just an overview of what was learned. So at this point in the lesson, I will bring the class together as a whole and wrap up the lesson. I will review the names of the shapes we learned, and with each shape, I will ask one student to tell me where they can find that shape. So basically, if I say a square, I will then review the name review the name of the square and then have one student tell me where they can find a square. So this will continue to open students' eyes to see where they can find shapes all around. And then after that reflection is over, the students will get the chance to say what shape is their favorite, or they will get to say a place where they will start looking for more shapes. So this is kind of just a point in the lesson where kids can really input their own thoughts and say what shape they like the most, if they have a favorite shape, or they can say where they want to start looking for shapes. So this is just kind of a time for the students to have fun with the information that they have learned. And then some conclusion questions I had were, what is one thing you learned today about triangles? What are some places you will start looking for shapes? And what shape did you find the most of today? So this is kind of just a big wrap up, couple of questions, and you'll get student feedback and you'll be able to see what students were able to find that day or kind of stuff like that. So this is just questions that help wrap up the lesson. And then student feedback is optional, but in my classroom I want to make sure that students' voices are heard. So you can ask the students if they prefer to work with the class as a whole or split off into partners. Of course, you can always do both, but this will kind of help gauge what you want to do for future lesson plans and what will work best with your students. So yeah, that is my lesson plan on 2nd grade math and literacy, and I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you.